Hello, here I am, sweating my way up the border between Italy and Austria, ready to ramble. Today I want to ramble about the Joe Rogan experience, or more precisely about Donald Trump's interview at the Joe Rogan experience, which happened the other night and which I happened to watch, at least for as long as I could stand it, because it lasts about 3 hours. I watched maybe 1 hour, and still that 1 hour gave me a few insights that I think are worth sharing. And the first insight is actually a rant. I want to rant about the state of journalism, of political journalism, because what happens to it? I mean, here we are, a few days away from the most important election in the world, indeed, and with, I suppose, a lot of people in America who are still undecided as to who they will vote as the most powerful man in the world, in effect. And the single real interview to which Donald Trump has submitted himself fully was with Joe Rogan. You know, this is the state of political journalism in 2024, I guess. A podcaster who used to be a wrestler and a commentator, a very good one, I'm sure. That man is Joe Rogan. That man is the one who gets to talk with him for 3 hours without any limitations, unless they agreed to some previously. They probably did. Regardless, he surely didn't go beyond those limits, from what I could see at least. And so, what is wrong with this? I mean, it is true that, Trump is a particular case because he has walked off himself from the debate with Kamala Harris. He says, of course, that the mainstream media there are all on Kamala's side, and the fake news, blah blah, all that stuff. So he's a particular case, but still, the fact remains that millions of people will probably vote, at least in part, based on what is not an interview. It's a chat at the pub between a podcaster and this, this entertainer himself, which Trump is, turned politician. No journalist. I mean, here in Italy, that kind of interview would still be carried out by journalists who would be pandering to the candidates, to be sure. Journalism is indeed in a sorry state for a number of reasons, but still, they would be journalists. In France, you still have a few tough and professional journalists. You have them here too, but they really are a minority, and they will never get 20 million views as that interview got in a matter of 12 hours or something when I watched it last night. It must be way beyond that number now. In Britain, I think Britain, despite all its faults, has still some real great journalists with an relevant audience, who have still the power to communicate a number of key informations, who are not scared of asking all the uncomfortable questions, which, from what I've seen, Joe Rogan hasn't done, because he's not a journalist. So just like those other journalists that I criticized, he's mostly pandering to Donald Trump, and he lacks all the other tools which even the bad journalists have, which is a certain timing in asking the questions or whatever, or or some fact checking. What about, please, I mean, again, I've only seen 1 hour, but really it was so obvious from the start that Trump is absolutely not made accountable for the nonsense he spouts. It's great to let your guest talk, but the only fact checking on the Joe Rogan experience is basically his assistant doing a quick Google live and saying, oh yeah, this thing is that, and then they go on and elaborate about that thing, without having a good premise, without having any real factual researched evidence. So that's just my introductory rant about the state of journalism and my sadness when I think, my shame, I would say, when I argue with my friends in China about the benefits and the merits of our system, of our free democratic society where the flow of information is indeed free. And really, if this is the evidence I'm going to have to bring to them, the supporting evidence, I don't think I'm gonna sound very convincing. What is indeed the point of having a free press if this is how the general public can form its opinion? Let me know. My mind is pretty much clear on that subject. Maybe you have other ideas. So down there is where I'm coming from. That is to say, Italy. Unfortunately, the view is not as spectacular as I wanted it to be, because it's covered. It's not a very clear day. And up there is where I'm headed to, and that is to say Austria. But actually it's where I was headed to, because I'm gonna go back now, because actually today we're switching to winter time, and in 1 hour it's gonna be dark, and I still have to go all the way down there. So I'll see Austria next time, I suppose. But instead I'm gonna keep discussing the topic of good old Trump at the Joe Rogan experience. I found the first part, there's 5-10 minutes at the beginning where he only speaks about his experience as a president. He actually speaks about his very first day in the White House, okay? And he says how surreal it was. He keeps saying that it was a surreal experience, and I can understand that. He explains, it's actually almost comedy material, because he explains in particular a moment where he enters the Lincoln bedroom, okay, which is I suppose a historic room of the White House, and he enters that room with Melania, and so he reports to us that surreal experience, in the most beautiful building, the White House, because people don't realize how beautiful it is inside. They think it's dull and boring, but in fact it's the most beautiful place. And the Lincoln bedroom is the most beautiful bedroom. this is how he tries to report to you some historical site, indeed, some important site in American history, and it's really revealing of what his concepts of history is. I mean, what his lack of depth is. He really has no historical perspective. He doesn't know how to apprehend it clearly, and so obviously, as always, he tries to sell you history, and he sells it to you like I don't know, like a vacuum cleaner, like some product, and it's hilarious and it's worrying at the same time. I suppose that some will say that you don't need to know history to be a pragmatic leader that will be remembered by history, incidentally. But I think many great political figures from the past will argue against that. You need to know. You need to have a bit of sensitivity to the subject. You need to have read a few books, for God's sake, and to have developed at least an embryo of a thought, and he clearly hasn't. And I mean, I'm thinking how, I'm wondering how he would react here, in a country like Italy that has history at every corner. I wish I could be with him, in the Sixtine Chapel, or at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, or in any of the hundreds and thousands of historical places that this country has. I wish I could be there and witness him telling him what this painting of Caravaggio tells him, what his sensation is, what his feelings are when he crosses any of the hundreds of medieval centers scattered across this small peninsula. And I'm not saying this, to try and look smart compared to him or anything, because in fact I think it would be quite enjoyable. I mean, I wonder if you could experience something such as Stendhal syndrome. Stendhal syndrome, it's actually a sort of medical condition whereby Stendhal was this very famous and this great French writer of the 19th century, and he experienced this syndrome while traveling through Italy because he realized that he was surrounded by history, indeed, by art, by beauty, and at some point he felt overwhelmed by it, and he really felt uneasy, like physically uneasy. Apparently the symptoms can reach things like fainting or a malaise or whatever, and I've actually experienced Stendhal's syndrome at least a few times in the first couple of years that I was here, when I visited certain places. And I hope you can experience it too, because after all, it's worth it, and maybe it shows that you are a bit sensible to it. And I wonder if Trump would feel the same, if Trump could experience it. Maybe not, maybe his ego would get in the way. But again, I don't want to diminish him. He's doing an excellent job at diminishing himself already. Because in the end, I think he must be on a private basis, on a face-to-face basis, he must be almost likable. I don't know. I think right-wing politicians in general, not just in America, but let's only stick to America, I think they seem to be more down to earth, but more funny altogether. I guess I could see myself having a beer with George W. Bush, more so than with Al Gore, and the same goes for Trump. Really, I think I would enjoy his company more than I would Kamala Harris, who, by the way, I think might also feel a bit awkward if she came here and she had to sincerely, genuinely tell me what she thinks when she's facing some Stendhal syndrome worth object or historical site or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, it's all well and good. I mean, I could have a beer with Trump, but that would be only between me and him, you know. Totally hypothetically, of course, we will never meet in this life, I guess. But on the other hand, it is quite worrying that the beer chat, the pub chat between him and Joe Rogan is actually going to be a benchmark for many people who will form their opinion based on that, you know. That is much less funny, actually. Anyway, we shall see. I'm starting to worry a little bit because it is getting dark way too fast for my taste. Although it doesn't look like it is dark on the screen here, but I can tell you that it does feel right now as if it's going to get dark pretty quickly, and I still have a long way to go, actually. Anyway, let's get back to Trump. I think he was making actually some valid points there, you know, some interesting points to which I can relate as a, I don't know, as a small local politician. He was saying, basically, speaking about this first day in the White House, comedically so, but also making points. Like I said, he said it felt surreal. It felt like, you know, the first day in high school, basically, because he realized all of a sudden that he knew nobody. He didn't know Washington. He didn't know Washington, the city, obviously, but also and especially, you know, all that universe that makes up the central government of the United States. And so he was kind of lost, you know, and he had to immediately to make some, I mean, all the key appointments, basically. You know, that's the first thing you do as a president. You have to appoint a number of people in all the important positions, and he realized that he hardly knew any of them, you know, so he had to trust them. He had to trust them just like that, you know, for some important jobs, and he ended up regretting it in certain instances, predictably so. And I can absolutely relate to that because I went through that as well. You know, I when I got elected as a city councillor, luckily not the mayor, I wasn't the one making the appointments, but still, that first day, I mean those first weeks and months even in the city hall, which, by the way, the city hall of that small town is quite interesting. You know, Trump talks about how impressive the White House is, you know. Says it's nothing like you would imagine it. It's beautiful, but at the same time intimidating. And while that city hall in that small town also has some intimidating side to it, because it's actually quite big and imposing, considering it's you know, a small town. It's kind of disproportionate for the size of the town, but mostly it is rationalist, you know. It's the style of the building is rationalist. Rationalism was this architectural movement that developed under fascism. So, you know, it's very characteristical, very easy to recognize with, you know, those straight lines and square shapes and you know, and severe figures and statues, whatever, symbols. And actually, I think it's aged quite well, by the way. You know, if you forget for a moment that it was born under fascism, that it is the architectural style of fascism, I think it looks not bad, actually. the more it ages, the better it looks, if only because there hasn't been any relevant style since. So, you know, it's maybe one of our last historical styles. I don't know. Anything that's been built in the post-war period in Italy, well, not anything, but really the vast majority is just ugly or uninspiring, bar for a few exceptions, but there hasn't really been a style since, you know. Anyway, I felt the same thing. I was like Trump very much, you know, in that moment, especially since in our case, besides, I didn't even get the chance to try and find my ways and my references or whatever, because COVID happened just 2 weeks after we took over. So the city hall was closed for several months. Then we finally managed to get in, but then COVID came back, you know. So for the first year, basically, it was kind of a mysterious place for me, and yeah, and it was so for Trump too. And just like Trump, I guess I was an anti-establishment candidate, you know, because, as I said, the in that town, you know, Trump tries to fight Washington politics, you know, all those powerful political families, you know, who have been there since forever and who are just sharing the pie between them. And I was kind of doing the same thing in that small town too, because for decades it's been the same people, the same old people who have been elected, the same old people who have a certain influence as well beyond politics in that town. I call them the 10 families, you know, which is a bit, obviously it's a reference to the 5 families in New York, but I mean the mayor before us was the guy who lost to us actually, was the son of a previous mayor, of the mayor before the one before him, you know, whatever. And both of them are senators. His dad, after being mayor, became a senator, and this one, the previous mayor now, became a senator too. And his granddad was a fascist official who apparently fled Tuscany, although it's not really clear why, but I think I can imagine why, since Tuscany is a very anti-fascist region in Italy, and it wasn't a great place to be, I imagine, for a fascist official, especially one with his role. He had a very particular role right after the war, you know, after fascism was supposedly gone. So anyway, I can relate to Trump, to what he said there, but then that's where our respective trajectories take different directions, I would say, and I'm going to examine that in the next segment. Well, I'm out of the woods. I had to run in the last part because it was really dark. Actually, there's still a small part crossing woods, I think, but it's less wild than this one, so it should be okay. But as far as Trump and I are concerned, what can I say? Yeah, when you're an outsider, an anti-establishment outsider, you're obviously gonna face those issues. You know, you're gonna have to learn fast. You're going to have to make decisions fast without all the elements in the equation, without all the information that you might want to have. You're gonna have to trust a lot of people you don't know, which I guess for Trump must have been a difficult one. And but yeah, the way, I mean, there is of course a solution to that, or there is a way to at least mitigate that initial shock, which can be lasting, you know. In our case, like I said, it took us a year, you know, because every time it was really a Pandora box game for us, because our predecessors left the building on fire, literally. Everything we touched, there was a surprise coming out, a bad surprise, not a positive one. They left without even leaving a note on the fridge, and we had to figure it out all by ourselves. And so yeah, it's a waste of time, of energy, and that's how you start making mistakes, which of course they're gonna use against you, because as soon as they found themselves at a safe distance, they started throwing fuel on the building, on the city hall, metaphorically so, But yeah, the opposition, the far right opposition in Italy is the epitome of nastiness, really. Anyway, let's not be too negative. The point is, all that can be, if not avoided, at least mitigated with a proper transition of power, which we didn't have, but Trump had. Trump's predecessor, Obama, well, he first of all, he had to provide one, because it's the law. It's called the presidential transition or something, where all the staff and all the new officials are being briefed by their predecessors, They tell them, look, this is the point we reached, we leave it to you here, you take it from there. At least it's clear. And Trump, by the way, is the first president in history who didn't grant or didn't want to grant this presidential transition information to his successor. He resisted until the last moment. He had managed to postpone it by several weeks. So there too, the new president-elect had no access to key informations, and had to figure out many things by himself, I imagine, at first. We didn't have any of that, because, like I said, our predecessor left a disaster, and in no way were they going to give us a few hints on how to solve it. Okay, which, now might sound kind of funny, but in reality is kind of tragic, because that's how it works most of the time, literally. And it really shouldn't. What you should do is what I did personally for my successor, is write a detailed report about your work, about what you did. I mean, I left a 30-40 page report to my successor. He didn't make much of it, because well, there's a dog, I was a bit scared. He didn't make much of it, from what I can see. Not even sure he really read it, but at least the information is there. It's on paper, and you must do that. You owe that to yourself, first of all, to be self-accountable. Sorry, you need to be accountable to yourself. You promised a number of things. You set out a program. Once your time is due, once your time is up, see how you did, how you performed. Did you follow the path that you showed, and also how did you do it? What are the problems you encountered? I've written all that on paper, You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your electors, and to them maybe you can give an edited version, which is what I would like to do. Actually, I would like to publish an edited version of my report, because obviously some information you cannot publicize them, you cannot share them with the public, really. I imagine that at Trump's level there must be some there's a lot of classified information as well, but you should at least give an edited version to your electors and to the public. And then you should do it because it's the right thing to do, because if you really believe in politics, if you went into politics to make things better, this is your duty, because you're making things better, clearer. You know, that thing, like I said, that report might not even be read by your successor, but it will stay there. Maybe someone in 10 or 15 years will use it as a basis to, you know, to carry on projects instead of starting from scratch, or ignoring that there were things already available or on the way, you know. So if you're a serious politician, and you know, I have the pretension to think that I have been one, you must do that. But obviously the vast majority don't do it. Some of them, not least in my team, you know, I'm gonna say it very clearly, they don't do it because they just don't get it. But many, and there I'm not necessarily speaking about my team, they won't do it because very clearly, very stereotypically so, but very truly so, they are in it only for themselves. Okay, they're not in it for the res publica, like the public thing, like the Romans used to say. They're in it for themselves, you know, and they're gonna stop at nothing. And this is one big weakness, I think, of our system, unfortunately. This lack of accountability and of transition, you know, of continuum between two administrations, you know. It's something we need to work on, really. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye bye.